Hello, everyone. Uh, Welcome to our second meeting for this year. We will just hold silence, for 15 or 20 seconds so that the hierarchies, the beings of light, the sage and the rishi can join us as well. And then we'll start from there. Thank you. Welcome, everyone, to our second meeting for 2022. The title for today's satsang or spiritual discussion is uh, Kundalini and self-absorption. So, interesting title and topic. So, when we say Kundalini, uh, and self-absorption. So basically, Kundalini is actually referred to what I call as the rising of cosmic currents when one experiences it directly while being in the physical body. But on the other hand, when you take what we call as the absolute or the universal perspective of Kundalini, then you see we have one what we call as God, which is our own real nature, which is the spaceless, timeless entity beyond space and time. So from there arises what we call the light of consciousness, right? Now, this light of consciousness, as you see, it has progressed towards the formation of the law of creation, preservation, and dissolution, the formation of, the Trinity, uh, creator, preserver, and destroyer, called Brahma, Vishnu, and Mahesh, in the Hindu following. Uh, so you see that creative power of, you see, this absolute reality, the consciousness, due to which has come in the space, the time, the names, the forms, the functions, right? So that aspect, what is called in Hindi, following from the Sanskrit terminology, is Shakti, or the creative power, and also termed as Kundalini. But you see, if you go a little bit deeper, then you see the actual truth is that whether it is the changeless reality consciousness or it is the changing images, the manifestation, which is seen by consciousness, you see, look at it very carefully. Even that is also consciousness only. You see, though the wave on the surface of a sea is unique to itself, but it is not separate from the sea, isn't it? Similarly, every image, though appearing as different and unique, is never ever separate from consciousness. So we can also, you see, lead to, the inference or the analysis that Shiva Shakti, or consciousness, and Kundalini, or the two combined, actually is the same, just the different phase, right? So this is basically what the ultimate realization is. Now, just you see, looking at myself from 1993, till 2000, I experienced actually the rising of these cosmic currents. You see, what are these cosmic currents? It is just like in the morning, if you go and sit facing the sun and you put some dew on your forehead, right, and you close your eyes and then gently open your eyes, what you will find is like liquid light is flowing towards your eyes. This is an exercise that was taught to me by the Rishi. And so this is this rising of liquid light in your nerves, which actually reaches the brain and illuminates all the psychic centers or chakras. One experience is that I had many experiences, and one experience was I was just sitting, and as I was sitting, you see, say for example, there is lava coming out from a volcano, or 1,000 dynamites exploding, or there's a million suns actually shining. So like that, suddenly this liquid light rose from the spinal cord and actually it reached the level of the forehead and just broke into this, light. So then gradually I learned to bring them down and balance them. And by about the year 2000, the currents had actually settled down. So what do these currents actually they do? When they reach the seventh center, you see, you become like an illuminated machine, and basically you are actually able to travel to these higher worlds, what we call as the astral world, the mental world, the bodhic and the atmic and the higher worlds. And you're actually able to communicate with the beings of light, like, Sage Ramana, Rishi Master Beyonce Duno, and others in that hierarchy. So this is just a brief overview of, our discussion today. We have got two fellow spiritual aspirants would be the right term to use, because everyone is self. We should never be forgetful of that. Every image is the same reality. So both these spiritual aspirants, Surbhi ji and Neeru ji, have actually experienced the rising of currents, and Neeru ji is still in that state. So I had requested them to, come forward and discuss their experiences and relate to what we call as the cosmic currents or Kundalini and self-absorption. Means completely absorbed in that reality, whether you are looking at the light of consciousness or you are looking at any image in the space-time manifestation. That's what we call absorption, that you're always actually in that state. So I'll request Surbhi ji to first do her presentation, and then we'll go to Neeru ji. So Surbhi ji, can you please, take over? Thank you.
Am I audible?
Yes, we can hear you. Yeah.
Yes. I'll start with an invocation. Om Namo Bhagavate Shri Arunachala Ramanaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Shri Arunachala Ramanaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Shri Arunachala Ramanaya. Not my will, thy will shall be done. Not my wish, thy wish shall be done. Shall be done. Shall be done. With folded hands, I invite you all to have a peek into this aspect of my spiritual journey, the Kundalini rise experience. And my perspective is that we don't consciously move to the Guru Tattva, to grace, but it is the Guru who's pulling us into it, who's pulling us into him, directly or indirectly. So my Kundalini rise experiences began in the year 2012. And by profession, I'm a doctor. So randomly, all of a sudden, I will say for no rhyme or reason, just started having feeling of weightlessness in the limbs. It could be in the upper limbs, it could be in the lower limbs. And I had the feeling that I was devoid of limbs. And being a diehard scientific person, I knew in my head it was some neurological deficit that was happening, maybe some tumor or something in the body. And I visited a neurologist. Then a couple of MRIs were done, MRI of the brain, of the back, of the spine, even of the upper limbs. We call it brachial plexus, the nerves of the upper limb. So everything was normal. And there was nothing. The neurologist was at total loss. And post MRI, there were symptoms of dysesthesia and paresthesias, that is pins and needles anywhere in the body, or burning sensations happening throughout the body. So I just didn't know what was happening. And before this, I had this feeling of a certain vacuum within. And I would often wonder what it is, but there was obviously no answer. So my friends would ask me, how are you doing? I would say, oh, I'm good. Professionally, things are fine. Family life is great. But yet there is something amiss. And they would simply laugh it off as some figment of my imagination. And then, soon after, there was a turn of events professionally. I was amidst a host of hostile doctors, hostile colleagues, and there was a lot of negativity brewing around me. It was quite tough to take, but then there was this thing. It could be handled only by a lot of positivity, by a lot of good wishes, pure feelings, by a lot of joy and love inside. And that was what I started to radiate. And I would just see the essence in everything and everyone. And soon, samsara was replaced by God, and there was just the divine and divine thoughts all around. And along with that, an intense desire to know the truth. I had no real guru then, guru in a physical form, and started doing Raj Yoga on my own. So throughout the day, it was yama, niyama, pratyahara, withdrawal of the mind. And in the seat of meditation, it was dharana, dhyana. And gradually, as I persisted with it, my meditations, the Brahma Muhurat meditation, the evening meditations, they became very intense. And I had abnormal sensations throughout the body, whenever, whether in the seat of meditation or even outside. And sometimes from the subconscious, a lot of negative thoughts, they cropped up. But then I had this desire, I need to know the truth. So despite all, I persisted with a smile. And then after a while, my heart center became very active. So there was very strong pulsations which developed in the heart center to the beat of 250 to 300 per minute. And I could see that this was very different from the pulsation of the heart. So the heartbeat was separate and the activity of the heart center was separate. It was quite disconcerting, but I persisted on, wanted to know what it was. And then in the year 2014, so it started in 2012, in 2014, had the strong urge to celebrate Navratras. So up till now, I had no religious bent at all. But then this particular year, I just wanted to chant and celebrate. And the first Navratra was on 31st of March. So as I sat down and I was chanting and praying with complete devotion, I felt myself getting absorbed into the murti, into the vigraha. I was scared. and immediately withdrew myself back. I thought that'll be the end of me. That was just a fear, I know. And then that very night, around 2:30, 3 o'clock in the night, I got up with a start. And there was intense energy and light and vibrations moving up from the base chakra, from the Muladhara, and moving up like a ball of energy. And they would stop at all the different chakras and centers, and they would change color, they would change form till the movement reached up to the heart chakra. And again, the same intensity, the pulsations, which were so high. But this time I persisted. I was like, okay, let me see, like a scientist. Okay, let me see where is it all going. I can see it all. And then the pulsations moved up into the throat chakra, into the third eye, and then the Sahasrara. And I was just a ball of light. There was just light and energy. It was like 1,000 suns into me. And at one point, it was like, okay, I'll explode. But then, fine, I kept on at it. And then the energy, the way it rose, it started to come down again. And when it was coming down, I had this this knowing that no, I'll be dissolved completely. There'll be no sense of I. Maybe the body will pass off. Maybe the body will be no more. And when this fear gripped me, I opened up my eyes. My husband, who was there next to me, I woke him up, and we went out for a walk. And the walking made it a little bearable, but still closing of the eyes was just not possible, because the moment I'll close my eyes, there were 1,000 suns before me. And that day I had to go for work also. So yes, went for work. There I got myself investigated again, all the parameters checked. Everything was within normal limits. But that energy in the forehead, the head, it was very strong, and it persisted that way. Now, post this, like I was this ball of energy moving from one place to other, I knew, it was very tough for me to get on with normal life like this. Interaction was happening. I was the same person, but the energy was too difficult to take. It was too high and intense. I closed my eyes and prayed to the Mother Divine and to Shiva Tattva. And I said, I can't handle it anymore. I was not prepared for it. I don't know what it is. Can you just take it back the way you've given it to me? Maybe I'm just not prepared for it at this moment. And then the merciful Lord subsided everything. Not entirely, but gradually, things began to subside. I could close my eyes, I could sleep. And when all this was happening, the basic life processes had almost stalled. There was no sleep, there was no thirst, there was no hunger. But then, by God's grace, things started to settle down. And I got into my normal routine, my normal life. And then the pulsations were still there, in the third eye, the Sahasrara. The pulsations continued, but more so when I was connected to the divine, as in when I was sitting or working or having positive, pure thoughts. That time the pulsations were felt. And it was very beautiful, and it was a wonderful pointer that I was, connected to the divine. And after this, I could sense energy patterns of people, energy patterns of places, of food, and my body would accept only very high energy foods. And yeah, the energy is continuing. And from then on, the Nirvikar form of Ishwar was inundated with a form of Ishwar. I began to worship a sakar form of Ishwar, from jnana to bhakti. It was a very beautiful change and a wonderful amalgamation of the two. And then Vedanta started happening. Guru Ramana happened. And yes, the journey continues. Dhanyavad. Thank you for giving me a listen.
Okay, Surbhi, that was quite beautiful and very well explained. It's quite interesting that when the experience is direct, it just flows from within you, you know. When you were talking, one could actually observe that. Thank you very much for having shared your experiences, keeping in mind all is the self. So, you know, we all share and grow, relatively speaking, when we share our experiences. Thank you very much. Okay, Neeruji, we'll move on to yourself now for the main talk on this.
Thanks to the grace. Salutations to Sage, Rishiji, Puja Anilji, all sages of the past, present, and future. And namaste to all beings that are present in this satsang. This talk is about my reflections of how Kundalini experience led to self-absorption. In 2017, I experienced rising of cosmic currents in my body. The currents are still rising and haven't yet settled. However, the focus of the talk is not on the Kundalini process itself. It is to present those aspects of Kundalini that were helpful in my spiritual progress. It is to share how Kundalini unfolded the reality and revealed what is the truth of a human or any other entity, and what it means to be in self-absorption. During my transition from an ego mode to the self-absorption, I experienced many developments, and with the guidance from Sage, Rishiji, and Puja Anilji, as well as reading literature and in-depth introspection, it became clear what is the nature of the natural state or the absorption in self that we are meant to reach. And essentially, self-absorption is attained when an individual is able to effortlessly and simultaneously live as the unchanging reality and the ever-changing reality. I will elaborate on this as we move on. Normally, when we think Kundalini, it is a dormant energy present in the human. We relate it to our etheric body consisting of nadis and chakras. In the etheric body, there is one main channel called Sushmna Nadi. That is like the etheric version of spinal cord, which is the main nerve in the physical body. And there are 7 main chakras arranged vertically along the Sushmna Nadi. In some bodies, Kundalini awakens, which means the light of consciousness from the body cells starts rising and moving upwards through the Sushmna Nadi and reaches Sahasrara chakra in the brain. Then the individual attains a higher consciousness, which means their consciousness expands beyond the physical plane to reach the higher planes. However, this is a limited understanding of Kundalini. As you see on the picture on the right-hand side of the slide, Sage says that thinking Kundalini from the perspective of rising of the cosmic currents in a human body is a narrow-minded view. Kundalini is the divine mother of the universe. It is the creative energy of the self, and it is none other than self. Kundalini is the light with which all manifestation takes place. Kundalini forms the body and runs the body. Kundalini is the prana flowing through the nadis and chakras that activate the physical body and carry out all biological processes. Rajivji, please. Next slide. So this picture will explain to us a bit better as to how we see Kundalini in the truest sense. What is Kundalini in the context of understanding self and, the creation aspect, the manifestation aspect. So self, the reality, has two aspects. And they are given on this diagram. One is on the right hand side and the other is on the left hand side. So the first aspect of self is named Shiva. This is the consciousness aspect of the self that gives us conscious experience. It is unmoving and unchanging. It is not limited by space and time. Self has no objective qualities like color, weight, texture, etc. On the right hand side, the other aspect of self is Shakti. This is Kundalini, the dynamic aspect of self. This is the cosmic creative energy. Shakti manifests as multiple forms. It changes with time. That is, Shakti appears in the form of a gross or subtle object, stays for a while, and then dissolves back into the field. Kundalini is none other than self. It is the manifesting aspect of self. The rising of Kundalini through the Sushmana and meeting with Shiva in Sahasrara revealed to me that consciousness aspect of the self and the creative aspect, which is Shakti, are inseparable from each other. The difference between them is only in subtlety. Consciousness is a very, very subtle envelope encompassing all that is there. Kundalini has some objective qualities. It is white light, semi-liquid, vaporous in state, containing countless particles with shiny, clear diamond-like appearance and energetically vibrating in the field of Shakti. These particles reflect the colors of light as well, the vibgyor, like violet, green, indigo, etc. That are also the colors of the different chakras that we have in the body. Rajivji, next slide, please. Shakti. See, if we see where Shakti is, one will ask the question where Shakti isn't. Shakti is all manifestation. Physical matter, minerals, rocks, the atoms and molecules that are constituting the physical matter, that is all Shakti. The various forces in the universe, electromagnetic force, nuclear force, gravitational pull, even the dark energy, which is without the presence of any material or radiation, which is believed to be present in the universe. And they say it's the residual energy and it is expanding the universe, and they name it as dark energy. That is also the form of Shakti. And also the life that is present in all living substances, that the prana present in them, that is also Shakti. Next slide, please. So with me, it happened that current started rising in mid 2017, but there were some very profound experiences. Of course, I'm not discussing all of them because experiences were happening every day. I'm talking in the sense how those experiences led me to focus on the self, and then how it progressed. So it happened in 2018. One day while I was meditating, I had a very unusual experience. I felt an intense sensation of something subtle was moving upward in the body towards the head, and it was giving me a stretchy feeling as if somebody is pulling me out of the body to expand it outward. So then the subtle substance exploded from the top of the head, and it spread like a sheet over everything that was around in the room where I was sitting. Days following that, whenever I thought of that experience, my body experienced a similar outward pull and the upward movement of the subtle substance, and an ethereal sheet formed and spread over whatever was there. For example, when I was near the sea, the ethereal sheet spread over the entire sea and the surrounding rocks. When I was in the park, the ethereal sheet spread over the trees, grass, people, birds, insects, everything, whatever was there. I carefully noticed from where this sheet ethereal substance arises. It arose from the right side of the body. In a few days, the ethereal sheet became a permanent thing for me. And I see all the objects like three people lying on the subtle screen. The objects on the screen look a bit fake after this experience. They don't look as real as they used to look before the experience. Just as if we drop a stone, like a small rock, in a jug full of water, the rock or any object, let's say, they will not look 100% the same due to the layers of water covering them. Similarly, as all the objects that I see, they are covered by the subtle layer of consciousness, which is very, very intense, although very subtle. The objects does not look 100% as they looked before. They look like an image. The consciousness sheet looks more prominent than the objects contained in it. All these experiences were very profound, and they were drawing me towards a state in which the idea of ego personality starts to fade because the object doesn't look real. So how come ego personality will be as alive, as real as it is? And the consciousness started becoming the focus. As all objects are images on the screen, then my body and mind will also be an image on the screen. What is the difference between me and other? When there is one source body, where is the separation? That changed my sense of space. Before the experience, my concept was that myself and the other entities are separate in space. But when the screen of consciousness is the underlying substratum of all entities, nobody is separated from the others. There is only one real body, and that is the field of consciousness. I will talk about one more experience. One morning, this happened in November 2018, while I was walking in a park, I felt as if the subtle substance from the head exploded and expanded to an extent that I felt I became an enormous globe. It was so spacious that it contained everything that was there: cars, people, kids, birds, trees, roads, buildings, everything appeared to be contained in it. And what my body, I felt the body was just a tiny speck walking in that globe. Then it became my permanent state. I had experiences like these every day, awakening me to the reality of our true nature. There is a dynamic aspect of our reality in which we have a normal bodily sense of consciousness with limitations of space and time. But our true nature is consciousness, all pervading and timeless. There is no physical distance between the two dimensions. Distance is only of subtlety. Body is a gross object and consciousness is the subtle current underlying the body. The state that I had at that time was Kundalini abidance. Kundalini gave me the sight of the screen of consciousness to awaken me that I am not a bodily dependent entity. I am infinite and one with everything. Next slide, Riti. So moving forward from there to attain the abidance naturally without any dependence on Kundalini experiences. So I started to make effort and also following Anilji's advice, guidance from Sage and Rishiji. I started concentrating on ego dissolution, following the principles of witnessing, as well as I focused on freeing me from doership, from thoughts, desire, judging. So first of all, this was reading literature on witnessing. So this parable, which is on the slide here, from Mandukya Upanishad, illustrates the duality of our setup, because there's two birds shown on the picture, and is quite helpful in understanding what is witnessing. So in the picture, there are two birds sitting on the tree. One is focusing on a fruit, and the other one is just there, silent. So the lower bird represents the ego personality, which remains under the influence of lower planes, physical, astral, and mental. In this mode, consciousness tastes its diversity and a dynamic state. An average human being is busy in career, family, astral and mental world forces fuel the state of personhood. There could be some sattvic tendencies in this mode as well. For example, coming to satsang, charity participation, service, selfless service, and so on. However, in most cases in this mode, these activities are done with the doership. Doership is very, very subtle, very hard to catch. So with the intention of receiving rewards in next life, there is attachment and identification with objects surrounding us. For example, career, children, wealth. They keep their hold tight on the ego personality. Under the influence of attachment, the person is engaged in a lot of mental activity, analysis, commentary, judgment, interpretation, emotions, grudges, keep buzzing all the time. But now we look at the bird on the higher branch. So the bird that is on the higher branch, that is fully conscious of what is happening around, but the higher bird is not doing anything, not building any nest, not flying to get food, not eating fruit. It is silent. It just observes and is quiet. It is viewing everything, the garden, the trees, grass, and the other bird functioning in the life, but it remains as a silent observer. In applying this principle on me, I created a witness in myself to represent the higher bird, to watch my activities, my thoughts, feelings. However, that became a tiring exercise and also led to some confusion. The witness I was relying upon was a mental witness that was created from my thought. That didn't seem right to me. If I needed to witness something, I thought about witnessing. See, would you work as a witness or would you do your work? I tried to simultaneously be a witness and the doer of my work, but that was like a pendulum. One moment I was a witness, and the next moment I had to move from the witness position to concentrate on my work. So witnessing got interrupted. In a few days, I got tired and I stopped witnessing. Also, witnessing using thought, it contradicts the teaching of sage that thought is a barrier in spiritual advancement. This was happening when my journey was going on. But when I reached the end, I came to realize what these birds represent is actually the destination. So I will explain that later when we come to that point. Can we move the slide, please? Besides the witness, the principles of desirelessness, the non-doership, and the judgelessness, they were also the part of my practice. However, overall, it was a bit struggling to reach the thought-free stillness that we are meant to reach. I tried to be still, but due to some distraction, the stillness got interrupted. I tried to remain non-judgmental, but I had to make judgments in life situations. For example, if my children didn't do the right thing, I had to tell them this is not right, and they needed to correct that. It was challenging to be like a stone. Which desire I end and which I keep? How could I be unaffected by what happens around me? So I examined my situation deeply, and I found that I was failing as I was trying to kill mind by using mind as a weapon. Why will mind kill mind? It will superficially kill, maybe, but the one who kills will have a sense of pride of victory in declaring, see, I am. That I amness is mental. It arises from intellectual effort. It is not intuitive. To some extent, mind will help also. It will raise the individual from lower nature to a higher nature of love, kindness, sympathy, bliss, regard. But the natural being, self, it's beyond all these realms of emotions and goodness. That is empty of thought. Self is beyond the higher nature and lower nature. From the perspective of self, all objects have self as the unchanging element. Ribu Gita chapter 12 guides, all is self alone. So how to come into grips with the underlying substratum of the good and bad, whatever is there. So therefore it was clear that just trying to dissolve ego by concentrating on ego is not enough to reach the destination. There is a need to do some more. Next, please. This is the main thing that helped me. So this is the most important slide. Only self can overcome the ego that we are trying to vanish. So first of all, needed a firm conviction that you are none other than self. Need to live as self, consciously live as self. This means less of the person, as less as possible. What do we refer to while functioning in our normal lives? We keep on reminding ourselves of how special we are, how maybe good we are, or how bad we are, how strong we are in some situation, or how weak we are in that situation, things like that. So person image is the most visited concept in our life. The person has to vanish. Only then self will shine. How much we try to forget the person is directly related to how quickly one attains absorption. Try to forget your person as much as possible. Less reference to their person. In the absence of person, the work will run as smooth as it happens when that's done as a person. So think that self is doing the work. Try to absent your person. I have experimented this principle and I found that as self, I was able to work much more harmoniously and efficiently. In the person mode, there is attachment. Either we are attached to our role, such as mother, father, worker, or we are attached to some object that belongs to us. That results in excessive thought, unproductive commentaries, analyses, and judgments. This repetitive attention to our person image or the mental images that are created from that related to the person distracts us from paying attention to what we are in our pure state. I was also doing some exercises to consciously remain as self, looking at what characterizes self. So trying to develop those characteristics in me. So one of those exercises actually that exercises was a guidance from Pooja Anilji. And I just tried to, when I applied that on me, I called that flipping. So Sage says, you attend to objects, that's why you don't see self. To find self, you need to transcend objects, all gross and subtle objects. So when I interacted with any object, I flipped my attention from the object to the source from which the object had arisen. So, and here it is worth mentioning, when I focused on self through this flipping exercise, it cannot be done without thought. So I had to think about self, just like, I had to think about witness. So it's just like the same, similar situation. But I found this better and there was no other option. So I kept on thinking about self. I could sense that in a few days, there was an emptiness building around me that was enveloping my body mind. Gradually, I felt that envelope of emptiness grew larger with an increasing intensity. Then I noticed that I expanded to a level where, without making any effort for witnessing, witnessing was naturally, uninterruptedly occurring. Then I realized the truth of the parable of two birds. The higher bird represents the natural witness. So it comes on its own when the person comes into absorption. It does not need to be raised from the mind. Another exercise that helped me, so I call it I am space. This exercise is of feeling expansive like self. Self is expansive, encompassing all that is. Going to vast spaces and visualizing that I am the consciousness space and within me is appearing all objects that are there. This helped a lot to remove the body-mind limitedness and producing feelings of expansiveness. One exercise that I call seafloor. So in that, imagining that I am the seabed. So the bottom of the ocean. So the surface of the ocean may get affected due to rain, wind, people surfing, swimming, various activities, but the bottom of the ocean remains unaffected of any movements of the surface. So trying to be the seabed sometime during the day. So that was also a good experience. Uh, One more thing that I was exercising was trying to be only two eyes. So I visualized that I am only two eyes. So I thought that I don't have a body, I don't have a brain, I don't have a mind, no other limbs, just only two eyes I have. So try to be like that for, let's say, in the beginning, half a minute, and then as the practice was better, increasing the duration. So that also helped, because self is formless and nameless, emptiness. So when we visualize us as nameless and formless, it works much more deeply rather than trying as a person, because person has the form, the name, a lot of maybe tags, titles, and whatever. But indeed, one needs an intense desire for self. Self will show the path. The belief that we are a body mind is the biggest hurdle in realizing our true nature. The main part of the practice is our firm conviction that our true nature is self. We are not a body mind, reminding us of I am aware of my own self. I am nameless and formless. This helps in progressing quickly. Another thing which was very powerful, and I can't forget the moment it happened. This is one day I consciously tried to shift my position. So what I visualized that within me, there is two parts of me. One part is my person, and there is other part that is self. So I consciously pulled me out of the first part and placed me on the self part, right? And the moment I tried, I can't forget, a shift really occurred. I even wrote an email to Energy about it. It never reverted. From that moment, I am self. I was self that moment. So when you try to reach the thought-free state from the position of self, see, the most important thing here is that all these experiments, exercises, contemplation, everything is happening from the position of self. There isn't any ego here trying to be self. So when we come close to self and distance us from our person, the results are much faster. Can we go to the next, please? Also, looking into some evidence in the literature, what is ego in its purity? Sage in Maharshi's Gospel on page 25 to 26 explains what ego really is. The ego in its purity is experienced in the intervals between two states, the states that we have waking, dream, deep sleep, or between two thoughts. The ego is like the worm that leaves one hold only after it catches another. Its true nature is when it is out of contact with objects or thoughts. So realize this interval as the true being. We need to strike at this interval between two thoughts to capture self. As a daily exercise, reach the interval between two thoughts and stay there, let's say for 10 seconds to begin with, and then practice and try to make it longer, increasing the duration. Most important again, doing the exercise as self, not as ego. When we say I am self, this wave is too powerful that the mind will find difficult to attack. Next, please. So gradually the mind was pushed away. There's a commentary, there's a continuous commentary that's going on even without any intention. It's like a cassette is going on in the mind. So the commentary that goes on and on, that was getting far and lesser. I felt that there was a It wasn't loud, and at times the mind was totally shut down. The periods of blankness were experienced, and consciousness always remained at the front. I had flashes of thought-free stillness, and then they continued for hours. A transition was occurring. Mind was like a remote, mind went to some remote place. It was very, very kind of a dim thing. And consciousness envelope was enlarging and intensifying. The most important finding of what I noticed in this transition period was that when I was distracted by any thought or any movement, I just returned to the position of self. That helped me to remain empty. And it happens that mind still attacks, but as self becomes stronger, a strength comes, a skill develops to catch the mind. Then gradually mind becomes like a servant. It is there, it is available. If you need it, you can use it. Otherwise, it is just resting. So that kind of thing happens. There is a control that develops. So in this phase, I felt immersion, like a flow was happening. Then I became like a hybrid entity, not just on the physical plane present as body mind, but also experiencing that I am the ether. It's like a state of fluidity, or like a vapor cloud, which is everywhere, present everywhere. Can we go to the next? Just a few more slides. All right. So what is it? The state of self-absorption. It's like living as a twofold entity. At one level, I live as body-mind, which is engaging with all normal activities of life, like everyone else does. And the body-mind is changing all the time. At another level, I live as consciousness that doesn't engage in any activity, that is here as a silent watcher of the body-mind and the world. Living as consciousness is not at the mental level. It is not a concept that I have created by my mind. It is beyond the mind. It is intuitive. Just like we don't have to imagine our physical body, as the physical body is naturally here. We cannot escape our physical body. And also we are naturally aware of our mind, that we have a mind there, Just as how naturally one is conscious of the air or sunlight surrounding us, likewise in my awareness, consciousness is naturally present and I cannot escape from it. Everyone has a default setting on their device. For example, your laptop has a default setting depending on which software you prefer to use for work. When you want to use a different software, your system asks you if you would like to change the program to the default setting. The physical body is the default setting of a person on the earthly plane. But in the natural state of absorption, in addition to the physical body setting, consciousness is an additional default setting. You don't have to switch from your physical body to be the consciousness. You can be both simultaneously and effortlessly. Person and self are the two sides of every entity. Earlier, I said that person needs to vanish, to come to oneness with self. That is when the journey is going. When the end is reached, self is so powerful that person will play as an object in the solid background of self, and self is unaffected by that. Being a person will not affect it in any way. All activities will happen as they come and go. You engage with everything with the level of involvement that is necessary in a particular situation, but your real position ceases to be a player or doer. You are here as self, watching the comings, goings, the play that's happening. One very important point to capture in this discussion is that self is a natural witness of the ego personality. In oneness with self, a person doesn't need to raise a mental witness to watch them. Next, last a few more actually. And when we look at what sage has guided us, how we should be living in this world, the conduct of an individual established in sahajsthiti, the natural state of absorption. So how is that? We can take maybe a few seconds to read. So this is from Guru Vachak Kovai, Part 1, Investigation into the Truth, Section 5, Conduct in the World, on page 40. Sage states, reach the heart by clearly knowing your true nature and abide there permanently as that unattached supreme self without slipping from the state of knowledge. Then act according to the human role you have assumed, outwardly behaving as if, like all others in the world, you are experiencing joy and misery. The teaching of the self clearly reflects that the person in the natural state is not a stone, devoid of emotions, feelings. Sage emphasized living like a normal human being operating from the place of self, not ego, and also detached from all the doings. So we should play our roles as normal, complete our tasks outwardly. Established means your prime place is self. Being in the seat of self, every movement of the world, including our internal environment of thoughts, feelings, perceptions, or sensations, whatever, will be viewed from the perspective of the unchanging element, such that whatever is, wherever is, and however is, all is self. Next slide, please. This is the same advice has been given to humanity by sages of all ages. Sage Vasisht also guided Sri Ram to play his part in the world, firmly holding the self and remain detached while participating in all activities normally. We can so this is this is also given in the collected works on page 127. Guru Vasisht ji says, having investigated the various states of being, which is waking, dream, and deep sleep, and seizing firmly by the mind that state of supreme reality, play your part, O hero, ever in the world. You have known the truth which is at the heart of all kinds of appearances, which means from the perspective of self, every entity which is there, all is self. Without turning away from that reality, play in the world, O hero, as if in love with it. So you are not going to disappear in a mystical sense, to that attained abidance. So now I'm not here. Rajiv, the next one, please. So the last part of this guidance, Sage Vasisht says, seeming to have enthusiasm and delight, seeming to have excitement and aversion, just like a normal human being, seeming to exercise initiative and perseverance, and yet without attachment. No attachment with the fruits, no attachment with any thing that's going on, with equanimity of mind, acting outwardly in all situations in accordance with the part you have assumed. Play as you please, O hero, in the world. So and also the activities themselves, they are seen as none other than self. So what we do wherever we go, anybody or anything that we interact with, in Sahaj Sthiti, all is self. Ego personality and its internal environment of perceptions, thoughts, feelings, sensations, and the external images that ego interacts with, all are appearances in the self, and that self we really are. Next slide, last one, conclusion. So concluding the talk, emphasizing the point that self in us needs attention to reach the ultimate state. Just like anything we want to accomplish in our life needs attention, needs effort. Attention to self is more important than the effort for ego purification. Trying on both fronts is more effective, but I would stress importance of being self more. Ego cannot survive when self is in the driving seat. Ego will automatically dissolve. For hundreds and thousands of lives, we have pretended to be a person so well that we have even forgotten to be what we really are. Could we pretend to be self now, to return to our true being? Thanks for your attention and patience. I'll be pleased to address any questions or comments. Thank you and namaste.
Okay, thank you, Neeruji. I think that what Neeruji has presented, about this topic is a direct experience, and I don't think really one can add more to what has already been presented. Now, Neeruji is in our WhatsApp group. If anyone wants to directly communicate with her, you are most welcome to text her. She's a very open person and always willing to talk and have discussions. Once again, thank you, Neeruji. Maybe this is the start of many talks to come from you, from what you presented today. Okay. Vijayji, we are at about 5:05, so would you like to just do a short conclusion, and then we can take some questions if time permits, or we'll go from there. Okay. Vijayji, please.
Yes, sure. Thank you. We'll just start with an Om. Om. So both Surbhi and Neeru have given a wonderful explanation of that experience that each one went through, and how that state of absorption and led to that state of absorption. This Kundalini Shakti, that just to wrap up and give a summary of what they have discussed, not necessarily from their own individual experience, because that is an experience that that individual has gone through, but to summarize the concept of what we term as Kundalini Shakti. Essentially, there is what in the diagram it showed the self, and then you have the Shiva and the Shakti. So Shiva is basically the potential aspect, the unmanifested aspect of the self, and Shakti is the dynamic aspect, the creative aspect, the manifested aspect of the self. Now, the manifested aspect of the self is what is termed as the mind and the experience of I, me, myself as this individual body mind. That notional feeling of attachment, thinking that I am the one acting, is that Shakti aspect within that individual. And that this term as the Kundalini Shakti, which is located at the in the physical body in the coccyx, at the back of the spine, at the bottom of the spine. And then you've got these chakras that are there through the body. There are 7 chakras that reaches up to the Sahasrara, the Muladhara chakra, the Swadhisthana chakra, the Manipur chakra, the Anahata chakra, the Vishuddhi chakra, the Agnya chakra, and then the Sahasrara chakra. And in many and most of the people, these nerve centers are kind of clogged, and you don't have the Shakti aspect, which is sitting, the Kundalini Shakti is sitting in a dormant state in the coccyx, in the Muladhara chakra, and it doesn't rise. And in some people, some individuals, the Shakti rises up. Now this Raj Yoga aspect of what Surbhi was talking about is something that requires purification of the body and the mind for that Shakti to rise up and clear the pathways to reach up to the Sahasrara. Now this is the Raj Yoga aspect of it. Within the body-mind framework, when the individual considers oneself as I, me, and myself, as the body-mind, and then when the currents rise up, and it was also explained about the Shushumna, So you've got three nerve centers, which is called the Ida, the Pingala, and the Shushumna. Now, normally the currents are flowing through from the Ida to the Pingala, and from the Pingala to the Ida, it goes through. And the Shushumna nerves normally doesn't traverse through the Shushumna. But when the currents, the Kundalini Shakti rises up, then it goes through the Shushumna nerve center to reach up to the Sahasrara. Now, this may seem theoretical, but the experience that each individual goes through really proves that this Shakti aspect, which is sitting dormant, can rise up and reach and explode, as was depicted in the Sahasrara chakra. Now, this is relative and related to the body and the mind of that particular individual. Essentially, it is the self itself that is functioning through that body mind. The I is only a notion. The doership is only a notion that I am experiencing this, but it's actually the self that is experiencing it through this body mind. And that was very well explained by both Neeruji and by Surbhiji regarding how the experience from doership to non-doership and how the doership falls away to reveal that all there is the self. Now, this self that is there experiencing through this body and functioning, as it were, as a human individual, can only happen when that absorption takes place, or realization and then abidance and then absorption takes place in that notional individual, and that doership drops away. This experiencing is something that each individual goes through, or supposedly goes through, in different ways. Even the experiences are very, very different. Some people experience the exploding within the Sahasrara. Some people see everything as that totality of consciousness. Some individuals experience it as all is me. This computer is me. Everyone here, there, everywhere is me. Even inanimate objects, I am. Because it is the self actually experiencing that aspect. There is no other. Which was so beautifully explained by Sage Ramana when he said that, and when somebody asked Sage Ramana that I am your disciple and you're my guru, why don't you ever call me your disciple? He says, because there is no other. For the disciple, yes, there is a guru, but for the guru, or whatever you term as guru, for Sage Ramana, there is no other. Even that disciple was himself. There is no other. So that aspect is the final stage of absorption, when all that is that self. And that self, when it is used, it is primarily that awareness. Even right now, if one uses this exercise and sees that a body is speaking, so-called individuals are listening, but all there is that awareness of the sound and that awareness of the hearing. There is only awareness that is happening. The I, the individual, the doer, is non-existent. There is only awareness that is seeing this. And when one truly finds out through whatever exercises one goes through, and there were many exercises that were explained and depicted that were experienced by Neeruji and by Surbhiji. When one finds out who is this who is experiencing it, one can't be the self. one cannot and never can be the self, because one is the self. You cannot be something which you already are. If that is kept at the back of the mind, when that mind is functioning as an individual, the dissolution of that mind will happen when the intensity of that requirement and that wanting becomes absolutely deep and intense. This is the crux of spirituality, the crux of understanding that one is not a human individual on a spiritual journey. One is not a human individual on a spiritual journey, but one is a spiritual being on a human journey. And that spiritual being is the self, that totality of consciousness, that absolute pure awareness. And that is functioning as unity. Essentially, Shiva and Shakti are not separate. Shakti is Shiva and Shiva is Shakti, because that is the self. The creative aspect and the dynamic aspect and the potential aspect are the same. If that is understood and that clarity of vision dawns in that so-called individual, the dissolution of that individual as I has to happen. There is no doubt about that. And when that happens, doubts disappear. There are no doubts. This is the crux. This is a summary of what was discussed by Neeruji and by Surbhiji, and beautifully explained from their own experiential, uh, you know, experiences that they went through. And these people, whoever considers oneself the notional I, considers themselves and wants to progress on the spiritual path, can use these exercises that they've explained as stepping stones, but does not necessarily have to use the same techniques. Use whatever techniques are required, doesn't really matter. As long as the intensity of wanting is deep enough, there is no doubt that that absolute self, that pure consciousness, has to bestow upon that notional individual the clarity to transcend this individuality, to be one with that supreme consciousness, which you already are, which is what is your true nature. Let us be absorbed in this silence. Let us sit silent for just 1 minute, absorbing that absolute reality, that pureness, pure awareness that is our true nature, and sit silent for a minute. Purnamada Purnamidam Purnaat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadhaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Vijayji. So basically, we now come to the conclusion of today's talk. Is there anyone who has got any query? We can take about a few minutes to answer any questions. So if anyone wants to discuss or just put forward a short query, please just unmute yourself and you're welcome to, ask a question.
Anilji, this is Madhu.
Yes. Hello, Madhuji. How are you?
I'm very well. First and foremost, thank you everyone for all the insight we get into our lives and the reality. Anilji, the suffering we see on the TV these days or in the media, the war in Ukraine and everything, just coming on the practical level. Are we just seeing images here? Is the consciousness just expressing another dance outside, a Tandav Nritya happening over there, or what's all this? Could you please elaborate on that? Is it Shiva's Tandav going on? Is it he's just going crazy? And are we just, it's not just me seeing all this, the whole world is seeing through technology. Everyone can view it. We are all seeing, it's not my own creation. It's the self presenting itself in that form. I do realize that. I am sensitive towards it, and I'm in certain ways when I transfer into self, I become, I won't say insensitive, but my heart doesn't just break into pieces, but it does. It keeps breaking into pieces, does not break into pieces, breaks into pieces, does not break into pieces as I shift from me to self. I just want you to elaborate on that, please.
Yeah, look, you see, what you have got to look at is, Madhuji, that when you are going to look at it from the personality, yes, right? But when you are going to look at it from the perspective of consciousness, it does not make any difference.
Yeah.
Because you see, look at one thing, that this is changing reality. The nature of changing reality is going to be good, it's going to be neutral, and it's going to be poisonous, right? But what you've got to look at is, today only in the morning, I had a satsang, and I said that how can it be that the same consciousness looks at people like Jesus and Gautam Buddha, and the same consciousness is looking at a war in Ukraine? Isn't there something fishy? Just think about it.
Yes.
Look, the source is the same. You got to
Yes.
look at it practically. Not only the source is the same, it is the source itself.
Yes.
Okay? Until you reach that point of maturity in your sadhana, what Neeruji said, that I am self, which is the highest culmination, you see, thoughts and feelings will not free us from this bondage. It is the history of our evolution, right? Even during the 24 hours, you go to deep sleep and wake up again with none of these wars, right? Similarly, there was the Lemurian period, then came the Atlantean period, now has come the present period, and soon this present culture is going to finish. There will be nothing left of that. But the only time that you will actually find freedom from these images is when you realize that that which sees Jesus has come as Jesus, and that which sees the war has also come as that war. Because another funny thing about changing reality is it's not permanent, isn't it? Second World War came, and where is it now? Right? So that is why when we talk about Kundalini, it is both the static, conscious aspect, and the dynamic, the active aspect. So we can discuss this further in
Thank you.
detail, but briefly, that is the answer.
Thank
Right?
you. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Anyone else? Any question, please? So if it is not the war, then it will be something else, right? The lower nature, that is its role, to constantly change, to be a combination of sattvic, rajasic, and tasmic, right? Until you finally look at the underlying reality, right? And that is arrived at empirically. One has to actually, attain clarity of that, then only everything comes to a rest, not otherwise. Okay. Do we have anyone else, please? Any questions?
Can I add something to this
Sure.
point?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Is that
just yes.
just Neeru? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. 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 Just zoom
Yeah.
in your. We are recording. Yeah. Okay. Yep. That's better. Yeah. Please. Yeah. Add. Yeah.
So, no, just in continuation of this, like I was also thinking on these lines, and then I started thinking of Krishnamurti and how he is someone who never talks about, detachment, silent witnessing. Instead, he has a very opposite way. Like he says, "You are the world," or he says, "All life is relationship," and he talks about like actually being present to conflict, to sorrow, to fear, you know, to so and instead he's also actually coming to the same thing, but he's actually saying that to be even with completely with a sorrow, when you're with it with complete awareness and presence, non-judgmental presence without thought. So actually the same thing we can arrive at it both through the suffering we see around us and through inner journey, our own thing. So yeah, I was just like reflecting on this because Krishnamurti is actually, I thought, very helpful in this kind of answer where he's
Yeah.
because yeah. So that's all.
Krishnamurti had a fully awakened Kundalini, you see, a fully awakened Kundalini. And that's the perspective from where he used to talk about, because any Besant and all these said, oh, he is the next Christ, and he rejected that. He said, I'm not the next Christ. I am basically the way I am. But he was illuminated, He had this full awakening of the Kundalini at a very young age. And yes, you are correct. That is right, you see. Because if everything is that same reality, then that also is the way to arrive at it, isn't it? I mean, is it we arriving there or the self arriving at his own reality? Okay, all right. Thank you, Nehaji. Thank you for putting forward your views. Okay, is there anyone else, please, who would like to just briefly come in? Or should we bring the get together to a close? So it's going to be the same link, and it's always the second Sunday of every month. But just from the perspective in India, the clocks are going to move backwards. So there will be 4.5 hours difference rather than 5.5 hours. So if it is 4 o'clock here, then it will be 11:30 in India. So the satsang in April second week will be at 11:30 for people in India, not at 10:30. Kindly please make a note of that because we have the daylight saving, and so it will remain from April till October for 6 months. So 11:30 next time. And I think the topic next time is fate and freedom, which is quite interesting, being presented by Rajiv ji and Vijay Gokran ji. Okay, thank you to all of you for having given your valuable time, especially on a Sunday to have attended the satsang. Hope that it has been useful to everyone. Savita ji was, putting forward a query, can we have a satsang every Sunday? Unfortunately, that's been the tradition, and whatever the sage has asked, that's what we have been doing since 1993. So it's one satsang every month from February till October, which now we are doing on Zoom. Before it used to be done face to face. But otherwise, everyone within the group is always available for mutual discussion, which one can do on WhatsApp. Okay. Thank you very much. And with that, we will take leave. Rajivji, can you please stop the recording? Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
Anilji.
Thank you.